Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had with Joe Saward, one of Formula One's most independent and insightful journalists. Listener Heath asks, what's the biggest business change in Formula One over the last 20 years? As you'll hear, there's no shortage of candidates, but Joe lands on one that might surprise you and makes the case for why everything else followed from it. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If this show adds value to your F1 experience, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Share this episode with other F1 fans. That's how people find us, and it's how we keep growing this community. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, gentlemen, I have to say, I really enjoy having conversations with you. So I've got a question from Heath, who is also one of our listeners. He's actually Drew's father, who we've been doing a number of questions from. And this is Heath's question. What's the biggest business challenge in Formula One over the last 20 years? Here's why I love this question, because it forces us to really actually pick one thing, which will be hard for all of us, when there are so many candidates like Liberty buying the sport, the cost cap, the end of the tobacco money, Drive to Survive, changing how Formula One markets itself. Joe, you've been taking so many different pieces that are helping us over the many years that you have been involved. And then, of course, Dick, you've been a racer and a fan of the sport. So we have a lot of options to really explore. So let me throw it to you, Dick, first. What immediately comes to mind for you when you're asked this question?
Oh, funny because while you were reading it, I thought to myself, goodness, it's almost by era what the biggest challenge would be, right? Because you're right, the tobacco money leaves. That was a big deal for that period of time. The purchase by Liberty Media, huge, which is really interesting. I mean, F1 had done very well under the leadership of Bernie Ecclestone. And then Liberty comes in and brought in a fresh set of eyes, so to speak, and grew the sport. I don't know. I mean, if we think about it from the modern era, I think that it's probably a combination of the cost cap and Liberty Media, because what's happened is that basically each team's value, and I think because of those two things overarching, think of them as the umbrella, and there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath that. But to me, that's when the value of those teams went from a much smaller figure to now close to $1 billion, if not over $1 billion in the case of some teams. When Alpine was sold a couple of years ago, partially sold to the investment group led by Ryan Reynolds, the basic extrapolation of the deal is that Alpine was worth somewhere around $800 to $850 million. I think that was the number. I'm not
900.
900. Okay, thank you. And so there's no way they would have been worth that kind of money 5 years before, I don't think. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking is that, the sport became something where if you had franchise in the sport, if I was to go and talk about it like American stick and ball sports, being an owner of a franchise at that time was an amazing thing because you suddenly became very wealthy. I mean, you went from being very wealthy to wealthier in a very short 3 or 4 years, I think. So that would be my take of it.
Joe, you understand, and actually, if anything, I want you to give some more context on to what Dick just said about the switch from the Bernie Ecclestone era to the Liberty era. You saw that up close and personal. Give that, and then if you agree with Dick, what his biggest moment in the change of Formula One over the years, you can agree or disagree.
I think it's really easy. The word challenge is interesting. What was the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge was getting all the teams to agree to accept the budget cap. And Chase Carey, who came in with Liberty Media and is now going off to sort out MotoGP, he made that happen. Everybody said when they first came in, there's no way anyone's ever going to agree to that. And Chase got on to do it. And that is by far the biggest challenge and by far the biggest impact of anything. Because once he got that, then the values went up. Then everything began to move. Then the Americans came in more, et cetera, et cetera. In part, and this is kind of the irony of it, in part, Chase was helped by the fact that in the middle of it all, there was the pandemic. And the pandemic frightened the Formula One teams because they were these vast organizations and they were losing money. Every time they didn't go racing, they were losing money. And that's one of the reasons that Formula One got back on the road faster than any other sport, because they had to. It's also the reason that the budget cap went through, because people went, oh, just we'll do what Chase says because this sounds like a sensible thing to do. And so that helped. But I think there's no question about it. That's been the biggest challenge. And, I have enormous respect for Chase for actually having achieved that. Also changing the prize money structures as well, so that teams can now be owned by people. And they don't, in the old days, they were money pits. You just threw money into them, and they ate it and they burped occasionally, and, and that was about it. But there was no money in it. Bernie Ecclestone took most of the money, and good for him. They got themselves into a situation where he was dominating, but Liberty were just more sensible. When Bernie was gone, he got a big old payoff, and he was shoveled out the door quite gracefully, actually. He didn't like it very much, and he still occasionally bangs on about things just to sort of stir up trouble. But he was shoveled out the door quietly, and they got on with it and did it and made it happen. And they had Chase, and they had a guy called Sean Bratches, who was the guy who really dreamed up Drive to Survive, which is the other very important element in growth. And also, the sort of movie and these things. All these things came one after another, but the key element to getting everything on the move was to get the structure fixed. And the only thing I'd say they didn't do right was they agreed to have 12 potential teams when there were only 10 in existence. And that led to a lot of trouble later on, where other people seeing the, Cadillac, basically. I mean, Cadillac's what they call it, but it's TWG, which is private equity. And they're in it to make money, but they've dressed it up as Cadillac. And there was a lot of fighting over that, which wasn't necessary. There's still a 12th one out there, but I think it's going to be very high. The other thing is also, you can't just start Formula One teams. This is not like other championships. It takes years to get up to speed. Even if you've got all the money in the world, it takes years to get anything up to speed. So, and that's why the ultimate, if they closed it down to 10, then the value of the teams would be even higher, because there would be even more limited supply. Now it's 11, but there's still a 12th one out there. And I think that's more or less reserved for a manufacturer if they can't buy one. But we are getting to the point now where the initial sort of burst in value there are people willing to sell bits and pieces now, which wasn't the case before. There was a period when no one was selling. And that was, if you look at the history of Andretti stroke Chevrolet stroke, Cadillac stroke TWG, that was originally going to be a Sauber deal. Michael Andretti was in the process of buying Sauber, and it never happened. And then they decided to go on down the path of going on their own. And I think that, the whole sort of Cadillac thing came about because they felt the need, quite rightly, in a lot of ways, to present themselves as being a manufacturer with American interests, and therefore interesting for Formula One. The fact that they weren't really, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what becomes of the Cadillac in the long term, and whether they really come in. And I think that's very dependent probably on whether they're successful or not, or promising at best, because successful in a new team in Formula One is a bit of a long shot. And the other one is their engine deal. They say they're coming in 29. There's no logic in doing that at all, because, you'll build an engine it'll arrive 3 years after everyone else has started racing the same engines, and it will have a longevity of 2 years. So what on earth is the point of that? Which on investment make no sense at all. But we'll see how long it is before things get flipped. I mean, the Alpine shares you're talking about, which were actually, Ryan Reynolds was more in the background. It's a group called Otro Capital, who were the main players in that. And Otro Capital is now trying to sell that 24% of Alpine, and they want something in the region of, I hear, 600 or 700 million, which is considerably more than they paid for it. That values the team at 2.4, which is probably about right, given that Mercedes got a valuation not long ago of 5 billion. So that's the thing. sports franchises are completely nuts. If you look at the NFL, it's the same kind of thing. If you look at the latest deals, they're $10 billion deals. Okay, valuations only. But actually, one of the biggest players in that has also been this guy, Mark Walter of TW, because he was behind I can't remember which one it was now, but he's bought into one of these. I think it must have been the New York one. I think it's the record one anyway. Whatever it is, the latest big deal, which is the over $10 billion valuation, and he's behind it. So obviously, this guy has got loads of money and is putting it into sports where he's going to flip it and make loads more. Interestingly enough, people who came in to help McLaren in 2020, which is another American group, and they sold out last year, I'm told that they are the people behind Christian Horner to buy into Alpine. They multiplied their money by about 6 with McLaren. Now they want to reinvest that money going into Alpine, where there's potential they can see for doubling it, trebling it. So this is what's going on at the moment, and none of that would have happened without Chase and the budget cap and the new. So that's the answer.
So, Joe, let me ask you this question, because I mean, I realize that there's a budget cap for the actual operations of the team, and it excludes things like driver salary, I believe, and like your marketing and all that. Yeah,
is excluded too, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. And so, obviously the number is well north of whatever the cost cap is for this particular year. But what about the actual investment then in facilities? Like, I'm thinking like Lawrence Stroll, who's poured billions, well, not billions, but $1 billion probably into that new technical center there outside of Silverstone and things like that. Is that cost capped as well?
Yes, it is, but in a different way. That is cost capped over a period of time. You can spend X amount over 5 years, or capital invest, capex, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and also there's in his case, I think he borrowed a lot of the money, and I think if I remember correctly, he borrowed the money, and some of it was later turned into shares and stuff like that. So you can play these games. It's a bit like, if you can't pay the engineers bigger salaries, what Cadillac have done this year to get all these people to join them is that although they weren't racing, they had the same budget cap this year because they'd already made the entry. And so they were able to offer everybody massive bonuses, which are not salaries. So basically, they were able to pay twice what other people were able to pay. And people went, yeah, I'll go for that. But it's only a 1-year bonus. It's not, or maybe there are bonuses over a period of time, but it doesn't impact on the budget cap because it's not salary. The other thing that some of the teams do is that everywhere you go, if you're like me, you're trying to get upgrades on flights, and I've got a decent level of
Status.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But I never anything on a flight anywhere near a Grand Prix, you never get upgraded because all the business class seats have gone to the teams. Because what they do is they offer their staff nicer travel rather than higher salaries, and that's not covered by the budget cap. So you have these kind of ways around it. But you're absolutely right. The budget cap is nothing like what the actual money coming in and going out. Mercedes, I believe they haven't done it yet, but they are about to put in their or publish the accounts for 25, and the Formula One team, I think, is going to turn over $1 billion, which is wildly wow. Yeah. And yet they operate within the budget cap. So Toto and the other shareholders go home with an absolute pile of money because it's all paid out in dividends. And that's why people buy in, because if you can go home, in a year with 30, 40 million, even more than that in basic profit every year, it's not bad, is it? As a business, Formula One is absolutely booming. You basically can't lose. Once you've got one of these tickets, you can't really lose money. You're going to have to invest a lot to get to a level, but I don't think you're ever going to lose money. And show me a sports franchise that's ever lost money so far. Maybe there'll come a day when all the sports franchises crash, but somehow I doubt it. I just think, I think the growth rates will slow down, but I don't think they'll come down a lot because there's enough demand. People want sport. People want live sport, and live sport makes money. So I just think you'll see a sort of plateau effect on the valuations in time. That there's going to come to a point. Nowadays, there's always somebody with a ton of money, doesn't know what to do with it. And in order to get a bit of glitz and have some fun, they'll buy 1% of something that puts a valuation on a team way beyond what it really is worth. If you buy 1% of the New York Yankees, it might cost you X amount. But if that values it at something ridiculous, you don't care because it's great and it didn't cost you a lot. And you get to go sit in the box and cheer the chaps on and be on TV as a Yankee, whatever, you know. And that's what this is about. A lot of the cases, it's about profiling. It's about rich guys showing off, which is fine by me. I don't care.
Yeah. Motorsports has always been populated by rich guys, so nothing's changed.
The only thing that's changed is that in the early days they were aristocrats as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say the other big change is there's just more zeros behind all the
I know, but
equation.
look back at the beginning of it was all counts and viscounts and dukes and these kind of people. And then in the sort of, I guess, towards the 20s, early 30s, you got professional drivers who'd been mechanics as opposed to Baron von Blichthofen or whatever, you know. And so it basically, it became about fast guys after that. In the 30s, it was really about fast guys. But in the 20s, there was still an awful lot of them who were just either very rich or aristocratic and therefore very rich. An interesting social, the social history of motor racing is quite interesting.
Just as an aside, did you know Rob Walker?
Yes, I did. I spent many years with Rob Walker. He was with me in the media for many years. And we still occasionally in the press rooms of the world, we still use some of the things he used to say. He used to say things like, "Oh, absolutely marvelous." And his wife, Betty, would always turn up. "Betty, have you got the fudge?" You know, right? Yeah, Rob was a lovely bloke, really nice guy. And I don't know how many years, probably 10 years that he was around while I was around. So,
That's awesome.
and he just told fantastic stories. Not
Oh,
all,
he had to have.
not all of them, which could be repeated, but you know.
Right. Well, it's interesting because when I was about maybe 10 years old, I got introduced to road and track and started following Formula One. And he was not only entering a team, this is for Sabrina and our listeners, but he was not only entering a team, usually with Lotuses, but he also then was the journalist for road and track. So it was like he would take you to the races and he wrote in such a way that you really felt like you were a part of the team. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And
Who did that was in his island, became a journalist
yeah, that's right.
on
That's
track
right.
afterward, and knew Innes very well because he was around as well, you know. And that's great to meet. I mean, I've been very lucky because I've met people from right back. I started at a point in which the very first races were still what was left of them, and brackets there weren't many. But I actually met Rennie Dreyfus, and actually I can tell you a story. It's embarrassing in a way, but it's still wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and go, "Oh my God." I went to Czechoslovakia in the 1980s to report on a touring car race at Brno, which was behind the Iron Curtain. So it was very, very difficult to get there. And when I was there, to say that I was being followed I put it this way: there was a man who was designated to help me out, and he just kept an eye on me. Anyway, at one point, I was introduced to somebody said, "You should meet this. This is such and such, and you should meet her." And there was a little old lady, and I'm okay, fair enough. And we sort of tried to communicate, but she spoke German and Czech, and my German wasn't great, and my Czech was non-existent, and she spoke no English. And after a while, we sort of smiled at each other and nodded and went wandering off in different directions. And I thought, what's all that about? And then years later, I read somewhere that Elizabeth Junek, the famous female Grand Prix driver from the 1920s, her Czech name was Eliška Zhonkova. And I went, oh, no. I met Elizabeth Junek and didn't know I had, and didn't take the opportunity to talk to her. Like sort of, oh, God. Anyway, there you are. So
I like it. I like it. But I'm sorry you didn't.
well, the thing was, in that era, almost nobody survived. You know, by the time you got, I'm talking about in the 80s here. So that was 60 with one decent war and all the, and all the racing accidents that went on. There were very few people who made it through to great old age. There were one or two, oddly enough, some of the Germans. Chiron, I think I met Chiron once as well. but he was very old by then. And but I knew a lot of the guys from the 60s too, and I knew some of them pretty well. I still do, actually. But I've just been very lucky in that respect. Anyway, we seem to have wandered off the subject a bit, but anyway.
Oh yeah, just well, and you can blame me. I saw the opportunity to talk about Rob Walker, and I was like, before I forget, I've got to ask that question. That's great. I blame Rob is one of the guys that I blame for me loving motorsports. So I'll put it to you that way. Yeah, cool. Glad you got to know him.
Well, I do blame you because I was about to ask the question to make sure that our audience knew who he was because, like you, I've read some of his stuff, of course, many years late, and been quite impressed with the life that he led and the way that he cataloged and really spoke about the sport. It's part of the reason why I think I've developed this passion is also reading Rob's work. Two things I got to make sure for our audience that they're listening, we'll go back to our catalog of other episodes, is one, as I was listening to you guys, I realized it would be good for people to go back to our episode that says how teams make money. And it's a good primer on some of the elements of the business of the sport. So I'd recommend that. And then also what Joe just said about his missed opportunity, which I feel very sorry for you. And when you noted that at that point, even in the 80s, safety was still on its rise inside of the sport. And so you didn't get to meet so many of these legends. We have an episode about how sport or how safety has impacted the sport. And so I'd recommend to our audience to take time to go back and listen to that. All that said, I have a lot of thoughts, but I didn't want to interrupt because you guys were on a roll and I just enjoyed it. And if anything, I would say that some of the takeaways that from both thinking about Heath's question and listening to you guys and only confirmed was that I have to agree with you, Dick, that Liberty's acquisition and the cost cap definitely seems to have made a fundamental change to the sport and the business model. And then I love, Joe, how you brought up the pandemic and that in so many ways, I think it was the perfect propellant to getting these two elements to take full effect. You had the crisis, which was turned into almost a way of making sure that everyone just kind of worked together in a way that might not have happened in a normal or even the trajectory of what the sport might have been. Because it is, I think, when you highlighted just the overall sport aspect, I think that what Formula One and the business decision done by the cost cap and Liberty has created a new investment asset proposition that now teams and investors who are at the point of wanting to use this income that they have or investment options, it is shown that if done right, sport can be a valuable asset to continue to grow. The other thing that I think is interesting, and you brought it up, which was the glitz and the glamour, and that's always been in the sport. But I think now more than ever, because it is an investment asset, if you do get that access to the glitz and glamour, not only are you seen, but we also, and you know this better than anybody, Joe, behind the scenes, the conversations, by being in those exclusive rooms, you have the ability to network and build out many other aspects of your investment portfolio. So I think that's a major incentive to anybody who wants to have that business nurturing. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say there's a couple of things in that. First of all, the thing called the Paddock Club. The Paddock
Yes.
Club is basically where big business meets politicians, and a lot of those people are not there to watch motor racing. They're there to network. And that is massive. The amount of money that generates is massive. The other thing is, and I think he deserves a shout out, is that the major reason that Formula One was so successful in the pandemic was because Liberty came along and they began to hire a different kind of public relations people. And one of the guys they hired before the pandemic was a guy called Liam Parker. And Liam Parker had worked in politics in Britain. And when the pandemic happened and Formula One were desperate to go racing again, and they needed, more than anything else, they needed to have dispensations to allow the teams, because the COVID rules were so tight that if you entered the country and left the country, you had to go into quarantine and all this stuff. And Formula One needed an exemption. And Liam Parker picked up the phone and called the Prime Minister, who he'd worked for in the past. And he said, "Boris, you need to help us." Formula One is in trouble. We need to go out there. We need to be able to leave and come back, leave and come back, leave and come back. And it happened. So, and now, of course, we have situations where there are more and more politicians getting involved. People want to be seen to be associated with Formula One. And that's true all over the world. We have prime ministers, we have kings, I think last year at some point, I remember going to a race and there were 4 prime ministers on the grid, this kind of thing. And sometimes you don't even recognize them. I mean, or you don't know who they are. And sometimes they come because and I remember talking to one of them one day and he said, I'm here in disguise. I'm not here officially, because he's a race fan. And I laughed and went, well, maybe I'll tell some people you were here. But yeah, but that's the thing. You see, you have access, and then you get to know some of these people. It's really weird like that, and you find yourself knowing people, and you just start talking to people or nodding at people. Actually, is usually how it begins, and you end up with a nodding relationship. Then one day you stop and talk to each other, and because they go, "Who's this bloke I keep seeing all the time?"
Right. Who is he?
That's right.
Right. Yeah,
All right.
I've got that with Gordon Ramsay, because we nodded at each other all the time. But we haven't actually stopped to have a chat yet. But anyway.
Well, I think it should be more than a chat. You should ask Gordon if he could make you one of his wonderful dishes. That would be the way to get to his heart.
There's another very famous chef called Jacques Savoy, who is massive Formula One nut, who's obviously a Frenchman. And so there's a few of them popping by. The odd Michelin star pops in and out. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think even that, what you just said, this exclusive club that was essentially, in many ways, I would say, a fiefdom of Bernie Ecclestone, has now been opened up by Liberty creating like a corporate structure, and I would say bringing in some American business practices and growth strategies, which has changed the business, going back to Heath's question, and probably fundamentally the sports DNA, but it's also opened up a lot of more opportunities, and it enabled them. Like, I guess I keep thinking about, if that had not happened, the pandemic had happened in the previous era, would they have been able to adapt in the way that you did? I don't think so. And I think
a few teams would have gone out of business.
correct. I mean, especially considering when we hear now where Williams was financially, but as this was always right. And so
McLaren had these investors who sold out, and it was literally, they came in and it was like a 5-year deal. They said, we'll come in and save you, and we'll leave in 5 years. It was kind of a set term deal, I believe, and that's what happened. And they came. There were lots of people. I mean, and they're not all people who are famous. I bumped into a man called Rob Walton one day, who I'd met years and years ago, who is one of the Walmart family, and just in passing conversation, he said that he had a share of McLaren. It's like, okay, fair enough. And he was part of this consortium, but nobody knew that. And he didn't care. He mentioned it because he I guess he vaguely, I've seen this bloke before somewhere, the same old thing, who is this bloke? But never mind. So you find out stuff like that, but you don't know. These consortiums, they often consist of lots and lots of very wealthy and famous people who don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight. It's like making money and turning up at some of them.
Well, I mean, especially when you bring up the Walton family. For us, we're here in North Texas. That's right near Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. The Walton family has so much. So I think a lot of our American audience will be quite impressed to know that is a greater increased presence, I guess we would be able to say, of American involvement, which I just think that even what you said about the McLaren investors now looking at Alpine, it only goes to further the proposition that there is a stability in investing inside of the sport that would not have been attractive to investors in the pre-Liberty era. If anything, it would have felt like an investment into a money pit and constantly handing money over. So, I mean, to answer Heath's question, I think it sounds like we all agree Liberty plus the cost cap for sure, but it's also the pandemic gave the opportunity for it to really incubate properly. Am I answering that? Yeah. Like, it gave them time to see. Yeah. Well, it gave them time to see, can this be done, and to think creatively, which often is what happens when you take things that are seem out of the box, neat, and if they have that insulation and opportunity to do something that seems so out of the realm, giving it that catalyst or insulation gives it the opportunity to really nurture. I do like what you just said about the plateau though, because that is where as I watch it, I keep wondering is when are we going to peak? And when are we going to start to see the stability on the investment side of the teams? But it doesn't seem like even that would detract from what we're seeing in the racing context. Because I guess the question I'm thinking and kind of processing as we're talking is has the cost cap benefited more of the teams that were already in a good financial state and given them just further opportunity to continue operating at a high level and maintain a competitive advantage? Or is it truly bringing those teams that were in a lower financial state up higher? Do you see where I'm trying to
Yeah, no,
when we drill down a little bit?
no, basically what's happened is that a cost cap means, in the old days, Ferrari could just outspend everybody, and or any of the big teams, McLaren, at a certain era had more money, so they could spend more money. And if you don't have that, and basically a budget cap is kind of self-policing because you can't afford, if you're these big corporations, you can't afford to get caught cheating, so you don't cheat. You make sure you don't get into that trouble. So basically, it kind of becomes self-policing, and then everybody can more or less get. They're not everybody's at the budget cap level now, but they're getting there. And so basically, and then everybody has the same kind of facilities, they have the same kind of budgets, they have the same kind of numbers in terms of people. And then, yes, the sport gets closer. Now, there are many other reasons about why things are competitive. One of them is you don't change the formula very often because whenever you change the formula, it spreads out the grid. Look at last year with a mature formula. The racing was just unbelievably close. I mean, crazy close. All the way through the season, it was crazy close. And that's great. That's what the fans want to see. And that's when you get better results because obviously they're close and therefore a tiniest mistake means things happen and positions change, whatever. Now, when they're more spread out, which will be the case this year, it may not be quite as good. But then if you have a Mercedes supplying 4 teams, well, you've got 4 teams who are going to be fighting more or less because if their engines are the same, which they're supposed to be, they should all be near enough to actually make a fight of it. So McLaren, Mercedes, and perhaps Williams and Alpine, they may end up being the top 4 teams this year. We don't know. But, Ferrari might be good too. They've got 3 teams, bizarrely, Cadillac being one of them. I mean, it's bizarre. The whole thing's bizarre, isn't it? Because Aston Martin's got Honda engines. How does that work? I don't understand. I don't understand the whole branding thing. You have McLaren, which is a car company which uses Mercedes engines. You have Alpine, which is a car company using Mercedes engines. You have Aston Martin, a car company using Honda engines, and you have Cadillac using Ferrari engines. So it's all very weird at the moment, but it would all calm down over time. And over time, all these teams by 2031, with the regulations staying the same, I'm sure everyone will be very close together again. And then we'll have another rule change. We don't even know what that's going to be yet, but we'll have another rule change and things will spread out a bit more. My view is, as long as we're going on the right path overall technology, and there is no question about having to go towards more hybrid, not full electricity, because full electricity is still a long way away, invading the whole car industry, but to have hybrids and to be moving towards electrical power, that's the right place to be for the industry. And we have to keep going to the industry. And anyone who thinks that, let's put in V10s and V8s and go back to the good old days, you might as well just shoot Formula One in the head straight away because it will not be a success.
Ooh, that's a little bit of fighting words right there, Dick. I will say that I think we're definitely a V10 or like the previous era. But before we go to that rabbit hole because I want to come back for a second. Let me okay, so the cost cap side, I totally see what you're saying about the racing. I guess going to what you said about the business class tickets and the other elements that are incentives towards talent retention and prioritization infrastructure. I guess that a larger team was set up, or a more established team with a higher budget was set up to already be able to take in some of this creative approaches that a team with a lower budget pre-cost cap is probably maybe getting to that point where they can start to incentivize team building and retention. Do you see where I wonder, has the cap really brought those back teams into the front financially as intended this many years? If we exempt out some of the racing rule side of it, do you see like the actual formula, actual technical sell? Do you see where I'm kind of going, Joe? I don't know if I'm clearly asking the question.
Well, I think basically the answer to that is yes, because it takes a long time to close the gap to the guys at the front with the big money. But what gets money is success. That's why Mercedes has such a big turnover. That's why Ferrari is worth a lot of money as a racing team. But if you look at McLaren, for example, they were struggling along for a lot of years. And then suddenly they get some more money, they get some better people. And then last year they're on it. Red Bull have been thereabouts, there and thereabouts for many years. But McLaren have come back from nowhere. At the moment, we've got Williams coming back from literally the verge of extinction. And, there's lots of reasons for it to happen, but basically everybody is closing up. And that's what it's designed to be. And it just takes time and it takes money. And then if you have success, it brings money, not just as prize money, but also in sponsorship. So, if you drop 6 places in the Constructors' Championship, and that's for the teams, by the way, the Drivers' Championship is fundamentally irrelevant. I know everyone thinks it's the big thing. For the teams, it's the constructors that matters.
Yes.
If you drop a few places, you're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars. And sometimes there'll be a battle going on for 6th place, which is worth tens of millions of dollars. But nobody knows that.
I agree with you. And if anything, I think is we're recording this in 2026. What you just said about McLaren and then now where Williams is, it's interesting if you look at the driver's suits or the liveries of a Williams car in 2020 versus today launching into the 2026 season, the number of sponsors that are on the livery and the suits of a Williams is, I think, got to be at least quadrupled, if not more.
And the quality of the sponsors as well.
Yes, yes. And so I think that goes back to the investment class that wants to put into sport, maybe is not wanting to spend as much of what would today be paying into a Ferrari sponsorship or Mercedes, a higher competition to invest. You have a team like Williams that needs it and is willing to negotiate that. And it's maybe a good entry level, which is maybe part of what this McLaren group or previous McLaren investors are looking at right now in an Alpine. They made a good return on their McLaren investment, and whether or not there was a time duration, they can take that, turn that back into what they've already seen as a good sport to invest. They understand the business, come into Alpine, which is in need and needs in many directions it's in need, come in and do the same thing again with someone like Christian who knows the sport and watched this and developed the sport so well. It makes a lot of sense to me as a business proposition, something that maybe pre-Liberty would have been feeling like a astronomical cost, no assurance that you would ever see your money back. Here, you have a little bit more certainty in an investment proposition.
Yeah, no, that's all true. I think that if you look at the number of teams in the Bernie Ecclestone era who came along and went out of business, I mean, it's 30 odd teams, I think, came and went. And after a while, it got to be so expensive. Failure was, it got to a point where they even starting down the path became very difficult. And so, and now I think we have these sustainable units, and whether it's 11, 12, 10, whatever, I don't see any of these teams going out of business, because the minute they, if they start to fail badly, that they'll still get a certain amount of prize money when they finish 11th. They'll still get the prize money. They'll have some sponsorship probably, and they can still survive, and they can be sold for a good pile of money, and let somebody else come in who's got the energy, motivation, access to the people, all the other things you need. So
Yeah. Well,
as a
and I mean,
business,
even oh, go ahead. Sorry.
as a business case, Formula One is basically you can't easily lose now.
Yeah. And I mean, when you say that, it also makes me think of the marketability and the ability for expanding the sport outside of the investment class, but actually looking to the market. If you have 10 or potentially 12 sustainable teams, you can think about the overall branding of the sport in a way that you didn't have 30 teams coming in. Like if you were talking about a campaign of get behind this team or get behind this driver, now Liberty or the commercial rights holder has the ability to really craft the narrative in a way, which then leads to things like Drive to Survive and other high investment deals or the Apple deal that they've done. If they can assure themselves that taking the time and or risk in those areas will return back because they're not having to change the landscape of characters, you can see why they have been able to take large investment or partnerships that might have not ever happened before when you had so much volatility in your product. I guess what I'm thinking of is like if you were creating widgets and if you had 30 widgets that you initially were thinking about and 10 of those were sustainable and 20 were not, you'd eventually start to say, is this company able to do this job? Because so much volatility on our product line, nobody wants to invest. But if you say I have 10 quality widgets that everybody wants, I'm going to now start to make slight tweaks, but ultimately I'm going to keep those products stable. Investors are going to want to stay with that, and you can start going into other markets. And I think that's what Liberty must be in my opinion, that must be what they're thinking at this point.
Yeah, that's all true. I think an interesting point there, we need to point out the fact that the teams still don't help themselves because they're always fighting over everything. They're trying to trip each other up. You know, this whole business we've got going on at the moment with Mercedes about whether or not the engine is right, wrong, whatever. It's just politics. It's all politics. I can't see how legally you can change something without getting into trouble. It's basically, if somebody's cleverer than you are, if they've read the rules, which have been written badly, and they've found a way to get around the rules, that's the fault of the person writing the rules. It's not the fault of the people who've got round it. And change the rule to stop it happening in the future. You close the barn door after the horse has bolted, but the horse is still bolted. You know, and the best example of that is Brawn Grand Prix. Brawn Grand Prix, the horse bolted, and there was nothing they could do about it because it was just clever stuff. And that's what actually motor racing is all about as well. So while everybody is kind of working together, the teams are still doing their best to slit one another's throats and fall over.
Of course, that's part of that's the joy of the sport, right? Their competitive edge. I think that it goes to, I mean, if we're looking at it as a business and a corporation with subsidiaries, every subsidiary wants to have preeminence and be the one that's seen as the best. I'm okay with them competing against each other and having issues with each other as long as ultimately the sport doesn't is not sacrificed. Like the business continues to go forward.
Go back to the first series of Drive to Survive and see what you can find about Ferrari.
Right. Right. They weren't part of it.
Because they thought this would never work. And then they realized, oh boy, this is working. We need to be part of this. And I can't, there was somebody else too who didn't want to be part. Maybe it was Mercedes even. Yeah, people didn't want to be part of it. And it was just sort of, oh, for God's sake, you just pull your head out of wherever it is and see the real world here. This is important. This is good. And this is what I mean about, you know, and the teams are always fought. They're all fighting over sponsors too. Bear in mind also, they're fighting Formula One for sponsors too, because Formula One wants trackside sponsors and it wants, you know, everybody's fighting everybody for everything. And if there was a little bit more sort of the spirit of let us go forward together, it would be so much better, but they're just incapable of doing that. And, you know, that's true for the governing body too. The governing body is always, for whatever reason, is always fighting somebody over something. And there's no reason for it. It's pointless exercise. Just get on with it. This is meant to be about entertaining people. It's meant to be about producing a good product and making tons of money. And let's just stop all this silly stuff and get on with it.
Well, it's so funny, I guess, because I've been reading, or refreshing my memory, I guess I should say, about the Renaissance era. And if any of our people in the audience are Italians, please forgive me because I'm coming from an American perspective. But when I listen to you right now, it makes me think of the papal and the Medicis, the vying for power and that you have like Venice, you have Milan, you have Florence, you have all these different country or city states that have their own responsibility. At certain points, they will create treaties and agreements with each other, work together for the benefit of everyone. But then when there's a challenge, they'll unify, and then it'll go back to disarray and chaos and antagonism. And so, I mean, I think this is just human nature. And if anything, when you talk about Mercedes and Ferrari choosing not to be in Drive to Survive, if I were sitting in their company, I probably would have made the same argument of not doing it. Why? You have an established brand. This is an unknown media that you don't know what's going to happen. Why would you take the risk? What do you win from this? Now, from a smaller team or an unknown team or one that doesn't have as high visibility, it makes a lot of sense. What's the risk to doing this? You get your name out, you get to craft your story. It's the late adopter aspect that hits Mercedes and Ferrari, that by choosing to come in later, the narrative has already gone past you and you're trying to catch up. But they did a great job of putting back their stamp as the established teams because they have all the resources. I think that now everyone is benefited because of their wise and strategic decision making that just proves again why they're able to adapt. And I think it's because they're larger. They had the resources to start putting out more sponsorship. Going to what you said about the competition between Liberty or the Formula One sponsorship versus the teams, I think we see that in the LVMH partnership. I mean, wouldn't every team have loved to have had that? But I can see why Liberty chose and why it was more of a value for LVMH to come and be trackside sponsor versus choosing one specific team itself.
There's a couple of things there, which is one is that marketing surveys have proved that the most effective form of publicity from Formula One is to have a team and trackside, because they complement one another. And I've seen a bunch of deals, like MasterCard, for example, that deal was originally a Formula One deal. And they then landed a better deal, and they sort of palmed it off to McLaren. Said, "Here you go, you can have MasterCard.
Ooh.
People have got Visa, and we've got American Express, and American Express are paying more money, so you can have our other deal."
Nice.
So there is a bit of trading that goes on in these kind of things, like sort of, you can have this and I'll have that. And now we've got a bunch of financial institutions coming in, and I'm sure it's the same thing. We've got Barclays Bank have just arrived for the first time. The Bank of New York's just arrived. There's all kinds of new kind of companies coming in.
That's interesting because that even gives Liberty greater capacity to kind of keep everyone corralled. Like if you have that type of ability to say, hey, we'll encourage this relationship between this specific team. If you're the one managing the pie, you're saying, hey, I'm giving you a...
Bernie used to do that too. People go to him and say, I want to sponsor Formula One. Yeah, I can put you in touch with the right bloke. Yeah. And he would pass, he'd sort of pass it on to whichever team needed it at that particular moment. And he often did that. So it's not exactly new, but it's a good way of keeping everything moving in the right direction. But what I was trying to make is that they make, they do trip over themselves quite a lot still. If it really was a more sensible approach. But then, some of it's down to character as well. Some people just don't like each other. And you can understand why. In some of the cases, there are certainly people I don't like. And I'm not going to mention names necessarily, but, because I'm supposed to be objective and all the rest of it. But some of them are real. I'll bleep myself again. Beep.
I love it. Okay, well, on that note, I have to say time is running from us. We, on our side of the ocean, have to get to our day jobs, Joe. You get to continue on your day. And we really, I've been fascinated by this conversation. I hope that our audience has felt the same. Guys, I think you enjoyed it as well.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, so thank you, Heath, for your question and forcing us to pick one. We didn't quite. We did a one with part 2, part 3 to it. So we gave you a full answer. And if anything, I look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, friends, what did you think of this conversation? We'd love to hear from you. What questions are you wrestling with? What should we dive into next? Send them to Sabrina at 2guysagirlandf1.com. We read every single one, and frankly, your questions are usually more interesting than what we come up with on our own. And with that, let me say, this ends our conversation. But we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.